What's going on, moviegoers, movie lovers? Mr. Filmstock here, and welcome to the Mr. Filmstock podcast. This is going to be a very special episode as I talk about one film this entire episode, and that film is called London After Midnight. It's a lost 1927 silent mystery horror film directed and co-produced by Todd Browning and starring Lon Chaney. If you've seen images of this film, you know exactly what I am talking about. The film was released December 3rd, 1927, and this is one of those interesting horror films you have to see to believe. Now, this is considered a lost film, and the reason being is that the last known copy of this film was destroyed in the 1965 MGM Vault fire. This is one of the most sought-after silent lost films of the world. And in 2002, Turner Classic Movies, TCM, kind of aired a reconstructed version of this film produced by Rick Schmidlin, using the original script of the movie and numerous film stills to recreate the original plot. Now, the movie originally ran for 69 minutes long, and its 47-minute version, or the TCM reconstructed version, 69 minutes of an original film. That is not long at all. It's an hour film, but it really shows its essence. Now, this film is based on the story The Hypnotist, which was written by Todd Browning, who also, as I said, directed this movie. The film cost $151,000 to make. That's it, just $151,000 to produce, and it grossed $1 million. Lon Chaney, who is known as the Man of a Thousand Faces and has starred in big, numerous silent film horror films, kind of did the real-life makeup in this film, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. Not only that, if you really pay attention to what's going on in this film, you can see that in the last scene, his real-life makeup case makes an appearance sitting on the table. It's one of the aspects of the only time it appeared in a film. Now, Lon Chaney is known as the Man of a Thousand Faces, as I've stated, and the makeup for the film included really intricate details of what he wanted to do. It's very rare that an actor does their own makeup, and in this film it included sharpened teeth for the character, hypnotic eye effects that were achieved with special wire fittings which he wore like monocles in a way. Now, it's based on certain accounts and surviving accounts that he purposely gave the vampire character, like I said, and kind of a weird quality because it was filmed in different aspects in different ways because he was playing more than one character. Surviving stills of this film show only the time Chaney used his famous makeup case on a screen and on the screen prop. Now, in addition to the authenticity, Chaney's character and the atmosphere within the haunted house, yes, the haunted house scenes, bats and armadillos and owls were used. So the intricate reception of what this film is absolutely mind-blowing. Lon Chaney, Leonidas Frank Lon Chaney, was born April 1st, 1883, and died August 26, 1930. He is the father of Lon Chaney Jr., who played the Wolfman in Universal Studios' The Wolfman. He was an American actor and makeup artist, but he is known for playing in silent horror films as The Hunchback of Notre Dame and, more subsequently, the famous The Phantom of the Opera from 1925. He had the ability to transform himself using certain makeup techniques back then that cannot be imagined today. His makeup and the ability that he could do certain things were so pristine and intricate that it was better done 100 years ago than they are today. He was active from 1902 to 1930, and his acting is just impeccable and fantastic, and just goes to show that he is one of the actors in the silent era that did so many things, and it really showed on screen, especially the makeup. When he played Quasimodo in A Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1923, the way he looks as Quasimodo really pushed the forward and efforts of how that character would look in the future of films and even Disney films. He also played the Phantom in The Phantom of the Opera. And not only that, he played Mr. Wu in certain aspects of playing a Chinese immigrant Yen Sin in Shadows, which today would be kind of, not foregoing, so to speak. But Lon Chaney is the reason London After Midnight is a phenomenal film. Now, on August 10th, 1965, the MGM Vault fire occurred in Vault 7, a storage facility at MGM Studios backlot, which is now the Sony Pictures Studio backlot in Culver City, California. It was caused by an electrical short that was ignited by flammable stored nitrate film. So film was stored very differently than what it is today. Now everything's digital. The initial explosion reportedly killed at least one person, and resulting fire destroyed the entire contents of the vault, which included archived prints of silent and early sound films produced by MGM and its predecessors. The only known copies of hundreds of films were destroyed. And it's just sad to say. And not only was A London After Midnight destroyed, A Blind Bargain, which also starred Lon Chaney, as well as Greta Garbo's The Divine Woman. Now, what this film has accomplished in the means of being a lost film, it's just sad, because you don't have many lost films up until certain years. Now, according to MGM Records, London After Midnight earned $721,000 in theater rentals from the US and Canada, an additional $283,000 from foreign rentals, giving the studio a profit of $540,000. I'm sure if you add inflation, that's over $2 million today. Lon Chaney knew how to turn heads. He knew how to make people sick, and it showed. It should kind of, in a way, give the theatrics of how he could accomplish things, and he did that. Now, the filmmaking aspect of it is so well done. The shadows, the slight eeriness of it. This is a scary film from start to finish. And the reason I say that is because the mannerisms that Lon Chaney gives in his performance is something that is unimaginable and that will leave you wanting more. And if you've seen the films that he's done, and it's sad that some of his films have been lost to time, is that he just gives a different prowess of how he acts. Even his son, Lon Chaney Jr., is an impeccable actor. But back then, you were typecast. And some are still typecast today in Hollywood, where you do one role, you're known for that role your entire career. Yeah, and it does still happen. Lon Chaney Jr. was typecast for playing the Wolfman. Ever since then, that's all he played. Oftentimes, he played Dracula and Frankenstein, but unlike his father, who had an array of characters to play, it really worked in his favor. Now, not only is London After Midnight considered one of the most essential films of modern history for films, its working title was The Hypnotist. Now, the aspect of how this film was written is very different. I mean, it's very rare where you see a author direct their own film. Not only that, Todd Browning was an American film director, actor, screenwriter, and vaudeville performer, and carnival sideshow and circus entertainer. He directed numerous and number of films from 1915 to 1939, but was primarily known for horror films. He's cited as being one of the early filmmakers to kind of use Edgar Allan Poe references in his films. And he's known for directing not only London After Midnight, but the two films he is well known for, and that is Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi from 1931, and the film that creeps me out, scares me, and I don't want to watch it, and I still haven't gotten through the entire film, is the 1932 movie, Freaks. If you know what Freaks is, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And not only that, he had a lot of collaborations with Lon Chaney and the actress Priscilla Dean. This man, Todd Browning, knew how to direct horror. You have horror directors today who really don't have influences. They only have influences from maybe from the 1970s onward with horror. But if you go back before 1970, not many filmmakers today give that homage to filmmakers, horror filmmakers, back in the day. If you see an homage to Todd Browning in a horror film today, that's very, very rare. Now, the thing about this film that I enjoyed was the makeup, the intricate detail, the way Lon Chaney played off the sharpened teeth and the beaver hat and the shadowing under his eyes, the dark circles, was so, so well done. Some horror films later on in years did and have an homage to this character in their films, but it's done in a way where it's very, very different. When you see behind the scenes photos of this film, it's absolutely mind blowing. You can literally watch this film online, the reconstructed version by TMC, which is only 47 minutes long. So it's missing 22 minutes of it. If this was a complete film, this would be one of the most sought after auction films of all time. For the aspect of horror, it is there. And it's done in a way where you see Lon Chaney and he's just doing his thing as the professor, the inspector, the man in the beaver hat. But there's more detail of what this character is and what this character goes through. If you just stare at this movie as you're watching it, you get a feeling of uneasiness, something just staring at you. That's what this movie does, and that's what this movie is. And it really, really shows. Now, what it does capture and its basis is that critics today need to watch films like this. And I mean that drastically. Because then they'll get an association of what horror films were like back in the day with a film like this. And especially with Todd Browning directing and Lon Chaney starring in it, it's just not your normal picture of what you would see. I mean, you could call it movies, films, the cinema, moving pictures. It's very, very different. And what MGM Studios, Pictures, or whatever you want to call it, did back in the day, which was founded in April of 1924. So it's 100 years old. They've produced amazing horror films and amazing movies in their 100-year studio career. Now, the thing about this is that Todd Browning remade the movie himself. Yes, he remade it into a talkie film in 1935 titled Mark of the Vampire, which is basically the story sees a series of deaths and attacks by vampires bring the eminent inspector Professor Zelen to the aid of a woman who is about to be married. Her father died from complete loss of blood with bite wounds on his neck, and it appears that maybe one of the undead now is plaguing the area. It has been described as one of the first remakes, though it does not credit the older film or its writers. So Todd Browning took the film London After Midnight and just reconstituted it into Mark of the Vampire with, of course, Bela Lugosi as the vampire. And this is after Bela Lugosi became a star from Dracula from 1931. This film, Mark of the Vampire, was released April 26, 1935, and runs for 60 minutes. Allegedly, the original released cut is a longer version. This film isn't as good as London After Midnight. It's just Bela Lugosi playing a vampire, which we all know and love. But what the difference is that you can tell that it's more story, it's more horror, but it's not scary. If you took how the man in the beaver hat looked and put him in Mark of the Vampire and made it a talkie, it would be a phenomenal film. But I commend Todd Browning for remaking one of his own films. You could say this is probably the first remake ever for a Hollywood film. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong with film historians. And, if you have a movie from 1927 remade about 8 years later, of course, this is going to be the first remake. So with both films, being eccentric to what Todd Browning wanted, the reception of it upon its release for Mark of the Vampire were relatively surprisingly positive and claimed that the film had more chills and thrills than the original London After Midnight. So it goes to show how in 8 years, people, were shown how films could be done. Not only does Bela Lugosi play a vampire in this, but Lionel Barrymore plays Professor Zelen, who Lionel Barrymore is another prolific actor in Hollywood at that time. You might remember him as playing the villainous Mr. Potter in Frank Capra's 1946 movie It's a Wonderful Life, which also starred Jimmy Stewart. So horror films have come a long, long way, and for this being a lost film, it shows that it's very different. And the reason I say different is because this film today could be remade 100 years later, but you would have to constitute the aspect of coming up with a new story, a new look, a new imagination, which would work for a film of this genre. It's a mystery, it's a horror thriller, it's a detective story going after a vampire. It's very, very rare that something like this happens. Now, if you call it London After Midnight today, people will know it. But if you give it the original working title, The Hypnotist, it will absolutely be a hit. You give people the scare, the shock of what they want in a horror film, this will be a fantastic, good remake. Now, could you imagine the film remade today, but not a 90-minute version, not a 2-hour version, or a 2.5 or 2 45-minute version, but the exact running time of the original print of this film? Remake this film for 69 minutes or 70 minutes long. People will frolic and flock to the theaters for this movie, because a movie that's 69 to 70 minutes long, costing as much as like, oh, I can just go see it and waste an hour of my day to watch an original, interesting horror film about a scary movie, about a detective going after a killer in a way, about vampires. Okay, I'm in. Vampires are still in today in Hollywood. It just has to be done a little bit better than what it usually is for. The film, tremendous. And I keep saying it, I keep giving it high praise. It's one of my favorite films of all time, and it's on my top 20 of all-time favorites movies. And it just goes to show how the aspect is, where the setting is. You can do different things with it. If you haven't seen this film, watch this movie because it's absolutely mind-blowingly brilliant. The 69-minute version is very, very hard to find, but if you can watch the 47-minute TCM reconstructed version, I highly, highly think you should. Just watch it for the scare factor, what Lon Chaney is known for as the man in a beaver hat, with the scary tactics that the character does, and seeing just Lon Chaney play more than one character is always fun. Not only that, also check out Todd Browning's other films, Dracula, Freaks, and Mark of the Vampire, which is a good film, but not as good as London After Midnight. So there you have it, moviegoers, movie lovers, episode 4 of the Mr. Film Stock Podcast. Not a very long episode. I just figured let's talk about a movie that I liked and I enjoy, and that many people don't know about, that has been lost to time. And that film was London After Midnight, directed by Todd Browning and starring Lon Chaney. Now you can listen to the Mr. Film Stock Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. Just look up Mr. Film Stock Podcast and give it a go. I do highly recommend everyone see this movie because it's an absolute fun film. Like I stated, let me know what you want to hear about, what I should discuss about movies, films, the yesteryears of Hollywood. I will talk about everything of the past 100 plus years of the industry, give my thoughts on it, what I think about it, about films, directors, screenwriters. So a lot more great episodes are upcoming for the Mr. Film Stock Podcast. Stay tuned, tune in, it will be a blast. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Mr. Film Stock, and you've been listening to the Mr. Film Stock Podcast.